We're going to jump straight into it. In Luke 10, Jesus sends out his 72 disciples in sets of two, and he sends them out into their respective mission fields. And when they return, in verse 17, it states, the 72 returned with joy. Now everyone say joy. The 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. So Jesus sends out 72 of his disciples in sets of two, so 36 sets, and he sends them out on their respective kingdom missions. And when they return to him, they have joy about their successful results, about the fruit of their labor, about their success, and particularly about the submission of that which stands against them. And Jesus, after affirming the observations that the disciples have made about their success and their given authority, after affirming that, Jesus then says this, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Now, at first glance, we might think, Jesus, why have you got to be such a downer? They've been sent out on kingdom business, and when they come back celebrating success and victory, why you got to hit him with a wet blanket statement like that? They're like, Jesus, we had great success. They've returned with joy. They're beaming. They're like, you sent us out. We got the job done. And he goes with some downer statement. Do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. I want to put ourselves in their shoes. Picture yourself today in this scenario. God has a kingdom mission for every single one of us in different fields, places, roles, in every area of our life, as well as obviously in the church. And picture your workplaces, your businesses, in the church, in the area you may serve, or what you may do in God's house, what you bring here, in your social sphere, in your family, in your area of outreach, in your creativity, whatever area you feel God has called you to, whatever sphere of influence. You know, God has got mission and missions, assignments for every single one of us. And that's important because God gave these disciples that which he sent them out to do. When they came back rejoicing, they were rejoicing for the success that they were having in what God had sent them to do. And so picture where God has placed you, what he's got you doing, what giftings. You know, when we succeed in them, imagine going to the one who gave you the mission. Imagine coming to Jesus and saying, I overcame what needed to be overcome. I beat down what needed to be beaten down. We've seen great success. We've seen victory. And he says, don't rejoice in your victory over that or over them or over this. Rejoice that you're saved. What a downer. What a downer statement. But you see, there's something going on here. At first glance, it can seem like a bit of an odd thing to say. And of course, the truth that is being pointed out is not that you shouldn't rejoice in victory or when good things happen. That would be an incorrect takeaway from what's going on here, especially since it would contradict other parts of Scripture. But joy is so important. Joy is so important to us that Jesus doesn't want us to base our primary source of it on that which can be seasonal or temporary. He's saying to them, I want your source of joy not to be on what can be fleeting or sometimes elusive. Joy is so important that even though naturally we are going to be happy when we see victory, naturally there is going to be joy when we see victory, when we see success. The victories we see along the faith journey cannot be our primary source of joy, even though it may be something that God has asked us to do for him anyway. You see, we need to have joy in that which is constant, not that which is temporary or elusive, sometimes fleeting, sometimes seasonal. We need to have joy in that which cannot be shaken, that which cannot be moved. Because victory is usually seasonal. You will see victories, you will see defeats. You will climb mountaintops, but you will go through valleys too. A disciple's life consists of ups and downs. We will all go through valleys. So if our joy is only based solely upon good seasons, then when we are in a bad season, when things aren't going on our way, when we're not on a up but we're on a down, well, when we slip, when we fall, when we fail, when we don't see the overcoming in an area that we want to see overcoming in, then there will be no joy when we've made mountaintop moments and achievements and success and victory our predominant source of joy. If we've made them our predominant, our primary source of joy, then when we need joy the most, it won't be there for us. In lean seasons, we still need joy, even more so. In the valley, we still need joy. In fact, we need it the most when we're in the valley. And so Jesus here, what he's setting over his disciples is he's saying, you've come back and you've come back in joy because of this, but it can't be your primary source. Your primary source of joy needs to be that which cannot be shaken. And so if our source of joy is primarily set to that which is eternal, then we permanently have a source of joy that every single one of us can access, even when we need it the most, even when we're at our most down. Our source of joy should first and foremost be set to the eternal. That needs to be our greatest source so that we won't be constrained by a lack of joy when we do go through dry seasons and challenging times. The reason Jesus is encouraging his disciples to base their source of joy on what is constant, on him, their salvation, their identity, instead of that which is temporary, even though it is a God-given victory, is because joy is so, so important. And I think many believers can lose sight of how important Christian joy is. I mean, we can hold up things like faith, we can hold up things like love, grace, and mercy, and we hold them high and we think these are really important. But joy is especially important. In fact, joy is so important that it is the second listed fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5, we have the list of the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5:22, it says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And it goes on to list 9 fruit of the Spirit. But joy is second listed right after love. And if you would apply the rule of first mention, and that is a rule, a biblical rule when reading the word, that when you have a list or when you have something mentioned, when you have a verse and things are being talked about, that which is mentioned first in biblical studies is of the more importance. For example, in the Bible, when it talks about Barnabas and Paul, and Barnabas is training Paul, it lists Paul first because Barnabas is training Paul. But as Paul raises up and becomes the head of the Gentile church, it will say Paul and Barnabas. So just an example, it's implicit that Paul was the chief apostle of the two. It's the rule of first mention. With the fruit of the Spirit, in comparative order after love, we have joy. So you could call joy the second most important fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is that which we should be producing when the Spirit is given room to move in our lives. Joy. So why is it so important? What is it about joy that it would be listed second amongst the fruit of the Spirit? Joy is important because it's a sustainer. It will sustain you. It is a source of strength. That's why Nehemiah 8 says, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And we can discard joy because it doesn't particularly seem like something that's very strong. Of all the things we could list, attributes of God and godliness and fruit of the Spirit, joy just kind of seems like, it's just out there. Maybe we should have it at Christmas time when we hear jingle bells, carols. Maybe we should have it at birthdays. Maybe that is the place for Christian joy. But joy is a source of strength for the one trying to live the disciples' life. If the joy of the Lord is my strength, well, then I need that strength, which is found in joy when I'm in the valley, when I'm facing challenges, when I'm feeling attacked, when I'm in the down place. This is why when the disciples were on that mountaintop moment, when they came back praising God and they were full of joy, when they returned with joy, as the text states, because they were seeing victory, Jesus says that can't be your primary source. If you're to continue doing what I've called you to do, if you're to continue on this journey, that can't be your source of strength. Your source of strength can't just be the mountaintop moments. Therefore, your primary source should be that your names are written in heaven. Anyone here that's ever ran a team, ran something, dealt with people, they all know that when you're kicking goals, when you have momentum, when morale is high, people flock to it. People want to stick with it. People will be begging to join. People will be looking at your team. Think of your workplace. You're looking at that team that's kicking the goals, and you've got the kind of lame team leader, and you don't even know why they've still got a job. They must be related to the boss or something. And you're looking at that team that's kicking the goals, and you're like, I want to be in that team. Jesus is saying this kingdom can't be about that, because you're going to go through valleys. You're going to go through trials. You're going to go through temptations. This could get hard. This could cost you something. And so your source of joy, which is your strength, it needs to be based on that which is unshakable and unmovable. If our joy is based on that which is constant, then we have a constant source. It can't be your secondary source. Many believers live with joy as the joy that comes from that which is constant as the secondary source, the thing they run back to when the primary source, that is things that are going right, victories, everything going good, the blessing of all of this. They keep that as the primary source, and then that which is constant is the secondary source. And that's when we find ourselves before God. God, I need you. But that place of needing God, of having relationship with God, our salvation identity, that needs to be the primary source. And the victories, the success, the mountaintop moments, every good thing, they should be the secondary source. But they're not constant. Not if you're living on the same planet that I'm living on. Because we need to be able to access that sustainer of strength, that joy that is from the Lord when we most need it. That is why it can't be based on that. You know, if you've been serving God for any length of time, you know the difference between serving along someone who is doing it with joy or is at least in a joyful season and someone who is lacking the joy. People leave churches all the time because they end up encountering someone that is having a joy deficit. Trust me, I know. People have left churches because they've encountered me when I'm in a joy deficit. Or they've at least considered it. Haven't they, Terry? That was a joke. But in our own lives, we know the difference in ourselves. We know the difference in ourselves when we're doing something with joy or when we're doing something without joy, don't we? We know. We know the difference. And so what Jesus is communicating us to hear, the question we have to ask ourselves is this, and it's a confronting question. Is my joy based on me getting what I want? It's quite a confronting question. And it will tell you what your primary or your secondary source of joy is. Is my joy based on things going my way, how I think they should be going? And this is how we check ourselves. This is how we learn and we look and we say, hey, well, maybe I need to switch my primary and my secondary over. See, it would be foolish to say, you know, you should never have any joy in things going well, because that's not reality, but it can't be your primary. It can't be your primary source of joy. You know, I've been, in the past, so up and down in my joy levels that it is actually what caused me to look at myself as someone who I must say was a highly emotional human being, someone who could really go up and really go down. Whether you know it or not, my wife would know it, and maybe some confidants in my life would know it, but I would be very up and down. And what it led me to look at is perhaps I need to reset exactly what my primary source of joy is. And the reason this rings true to me is perhaps as a pastor and as perhaps someone who's very passionate about seeing the Church of Jesus Christ moving forward, I would get frustrated because what I'm wanting to see happen is God's business. You know, my prayers weren't selfish. I'm not praying for things for myself. I want things for myself, but these things that I was passionate about that were bringing me up and down emotionally, It was kingdom business. It was God's things. And I had to learn, no, even though that's God's business, anyone who serves God, any disciple is going to go through valleys. They're going to go through lean times. We're all going to get touched by the horrors of life. It's all going to come up and hit every single one of us. And so we need to ask ourselves, what is my primary source of joy? Without the fruit of the Spirit that is joy, then we are looking at a powerful, God-designed source of strength for our lives, and we're putting it in the place, the source, where we're going to need it the least. You are going to need that joy based on victory the least when you're in victory. You're going to need that joy that's solely based on the mountaintop moment. You're going to need it the least on the mountaintop. And so cool, morale is great. Momentum is great. Joy based on good things is great. But our primary source has to be that which is eternal. Or when we're in the valley, we'll quit, we'll fall away, we'll be stuffed. We won't be able to continue because we're lacking joy in the place we need it the most. In every area of our life, this is important. You know, whatever team or group we exist in, we won't be able to be that steadying force for the team when they need it the most if our joy is too easily robbed from us. If our joy can be easily robbed based on events, based on circumstances, well, then we will just be riding on other people's morale. We will be looking for other people to lift the morale because we won't be able to bring that morale lift because our joy can only be brought to the surface when things are going right. But if we're the person in whatever team or group we exist in and our source of joy is based on the constant, on that which is always there, that which can always be looked at and praised and admired, then we can be that person in whatever team we're in. If you're a boss or a team leader, you won't be able to be that source of strength during challenging times. Everyone will feel like the ship is sinking because the one they should be looking at, like they look like they know the ship is sinking. They have no joy. You know, if you're in a relationship, you won't be able to be the strength your partner needs when they need it most. Because when tragedy hits, when hard times hit the household, you won't be able to be that strength because your joy is based on that which is not there at that moment. But if our joy is based on that which is eternal, we will be able to be that figure of strength. As parents, we won't be able to play the role in our kids' lives that God wants us to play. I can't match my kids' joy right now. Their joy is through the roof. But what about when hard times hit? What about when challenging things hit? I need to be able to still have the joy, the strength which is based on the joy of the Lord at all times for the sake of my family. I need it. And so my primary source has to be that which will always be there. It has to be based on God. You know what? Having a source for anything based on that which goes up and down is a terrible idea, and it's no different for our spiritual lives. The joy of the Lord is our strength. That's why it's the second listed fruit of the Spirit. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Let's base that source on the pump, on the fuel, which can always be there. Our salvation, our identity, what God has done for us. Let's not base it on what God is doing through us. That is great. It would be horrible if everything we did for God just resulted in failure, just fell to the floor. We never got that promotion. We never succeeded in our workplace. Our business never managed to get flying. Of course, that's bad. That is bad stuff. But it can't be our primary source of joy. What I had to do when I used to be so volatile in my emotional state, if what I'm saying is ringing true for you as it has rang true and can ring true for us all from time to time, we need to confront ourselves. We need to actually ask ourselves, what's my joy based on? When do I have a good attitude and when don't I? What's it based on? It's a positional thing. You know, if my position where I'm sitting in terms of joy, in terms of attitude, if it's solely based on me getting what I want, things going my way, I need to look at that and think, you know what, that's a terrible and immature way for a disciple to live, and it's not going to end well. If this is a struggle for you, and to a certain extent, it really is a struggle for all of us, then come on, we need to switch our primary. You know what good practice You know what a good way to practice doing that is? Worship, praise. When we're sitting here and we're worshiping God, when we're praising God, that praise, when we're able to muster praise, when we actually think, you know what, even though I might have known this truth for a while, even I might have been a believer for a while, but I still need to view what he's done for me as praiseworthy. I still need to view everything God has done in my life as praiseworthy. You know what, my daughter, they've got so many toys. If my kids ever have a birthday and you hear me and Tracy say, hey, no gift is necessary, can I please tell you that's not just a front, that's just not us being polite. They do not need any more plastic, colorful stuff in the house because we have to clean it. So please, stop giving them stuff, every single one of you. They do not need any more plastic, wooden, colorful stuff in the house because we got to clean it. They pull it all out. But one thing I noticed is Alina would go from thing to thing to thing to thing. It's like she's got so much stuff that like she plays with it and it loses its appeal, within 30 seconds, and there's another toy, and there's another toy, there's another toy. I know every single one of you who is perhaps over 15 or 18 years of age, you look at the amount of toys that kids have nowadays, and you had a fraction of those toys in your life. Am I right? You had a fraction. And it's amazing how some people can find joy in the little they have. And sometimes when there's an abundance, when we get used to seeing joy in victory after victory after victory, success after success after success, item after item after item, good times after good times, smile after smile. And what we can do, because we're in a season where that is actually flowing, good times are flowing, victories are flowing, success is flowing. And what we can do is we can maybe make the mistake of realizing maybe the good times aren't going to last forever. Maybe we don't realize that lean times are going to come. There's valleys that are going to come. There's a valley coming. We don't know what challenges, we don't know how the roll of the dice in life is going to affect any household. We don't know. But let's not make the mistake when we're in the good times of switching our primary source of joy to those good times. It still is joy, but it can't be the primary. Our constant, our eternal needs to be the joy which is in what Christ has done for us. Philippians 4, rejoice in the Lord always, and I will say it again, rejoice. It just sounds like something you just kind of say. Whenever I've read that in the past, it's just something you say. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. But actually, this is very tactical, it's very strategic, just like what Jesus was saying to his disciples. He's setting us up, he's saying, hey, this is something you can rejoice in always. This is something you will constantly be able to rejoice in. And just in case we missed it, he actually writes, I will say it again, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always, because we can always rejoice in the Lord. And just in case we miss it, Paul says, I will say it again, rejoice, because this is so crucial to what sustains us. It's so crucial because it's the strength that will keep us going. This is what Christian joy is. It's based on faith in a person, not events and circumstances. It's a joy based on the person of Jesus Christ. It's based on the eternal, what has been eternally gifted to us. So as we said, the importance of joy is that it is a source of strength. It will sustain us. And of equal importance, we will do what we are called to do diligently and with the right attitude and without getting frustrated at the fellow servant around us. Why? Because we're doing it with joy. Whenever we're doing something without joy, I'm telling you, it's only a matter of time before bad things happen. And even if they don't happen to you, they'll happen to the one you're alongside. Anything done without joy will equal something not pleasant soon enough. Things were designed to be done with joy. That's why when we go back to Luke 10, when the disciples returned to Jesus with joy, Jesus says to his disciples, yes, you had victory. You had victory over the spirits that were opposed to you and what you were trying to do, but don't let that be your primary source of joy, because you will need that joy as your strength. You will need that joy to sustain you, and the best source is that which is unfading. Your faith, your salvation, your identity in Jesus Christ. And can I tell you, joy is not about necessarily happiness or laughing or jokes. You know, it can be, but it's the posture of the heart. See, I'm not a naturally extroverted person, and time again, I get told off in life for not smiling enough. I get it all the time. Smile, Dan. People are so rude. I'll put a picture up with me and my kids on Facebook, and I'm mustering the biggest smile I've got. Like, I'm smiling, and someone will write, "Smile, Dan." Many of you have done it. How rude. That is my smile. Don't be fooled. You know what? Someone can have the biggest smile on their face. They can be constantly looking like they're happy, but there's no joy inside. And someone could be a sour-faced person blessed with awkwardly angled eyebrows like me. But doesn't mean I'm not happy. Joy is not based on, hallelujah, brother, praise to you too. How is your week? It's been abundantly filled with joy. Really, they're crying inside. Come on. Don't mistake joy for extrovertedly laughing you could have the most extroverted, sanguine person on earth, and they're crying inside. They're broken inside. Joy is a positional thing. It's an attitudinal thing. You know, we see attitudes of the joyless just quickly in the Word. If I could have the band come up to help me. You know, in Luke 15, we have the joyless attitude of the older brother that even though he had stuck with his father in the father's house, he says, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." That's a man who had been doing what he'd been doing without joy. Matthew 25:24, "Master, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed." He had a different revelation than the two good and faithful servants before them. He'd been doing what he'd been doing without joy, and he ended up burying his talents. Matthew 20:11 in the parable of the landowner says, when they received it, which was already a blessing, when they had received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." That's a Christian life lived without joy. I think the biggest giveaway to us all when we're lacking joy is our attitude. Our attitude will shift. Our attitude will change. Now, why don't you all close your eyes right now? You know, in every sphere, I know in your workplace, in your studies, if you're a business owner in your business, the way you react and treat your employees, maybe you're a team leader, maybe in whatever you're doing in the house, maybe you're part of a team in this house, in this church, in your family, in your household, wherever it is. It's time to give ourselves an attitude check. Am I doing what I'm doing without joy? Or do I can I identify that I tend to shift to seasons of joylessness and it affects my attitude? You know what? It can be hard to apply over time, but we're given the answer to the practice that will take us to a place of constant joy. Let's switch our primary up. Let's switch our primary source of joy to what has been done for us. You know what? This is how important joy is. Why don't you all stand to your feet right now? This is crazy, okay? This is how important joy is. When it came to when it came to the mission of Jesus on the earth, it specifically lists joy as why he was able to do what he did. In Hebrews 12, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Even Jesus needed joy to be able to do what he did for us. If Jesus himself needed joy, if Jesus himself needed that spirit of joy within himself as the strength, then how much more so do we need joy to do what we're called to do? But here's the crazy thing. See, our joy is to be found in him, and his joy was found in us. on that cross for us, this eternal thing that we are to have joy in, this constant thing that we are to have joy in. He did that because his joy was in us. His joy was in you, every single one of you. His joy was in you, and that is why he paid that price on the cross. He drank the cup of all that we've done wrong. He gave us salvation. He set us apart for a purpose. He called us. He redeemed us, and he gave us identity as sons and daughters of God. He did that for the joy set before him, us. Now we need to learn from him. Our joy needs to be in him, and we will do all that we do with strength that sustains us.